Hi everyone, welcome to Inventive Mind. Thank you for joining me. My name is Gayani. I'm an intellectual property and business law attorney practicing in California. So this video, I wanted to talk about contracts and contracts for your business more specifically. Just keep in mind that it's for educational purposes only. If you have a specific question, especially when it's come to contracts, you want to work with the attorney who is in your state, knows the laws that will apply, because contract law, when it's come to contracts, you need to understand what can be deemed not okay with the state law that you are in, because there's both federal and state that applies to these agreements. So with that in mind, just in general, I wanted to give a few tips for new business owners that are using certain contracts, or like may want be tempted to use the online templates from somewhere. So a few things to keep in mind when it's come to those contracts is basically agreement of understanding between two parties. And if you are the business owner that is bringing that contract and giving it to a consultant, you need to understand whether that contract, who has the liability, who is it as the business owner? Let's say you are a seller of a certain good versus the buyer. So let's say you pulled off a contract from somewhere else and you are not sure if the contract was pro seller or pro buyer, then you are taking a higher risk, because you might have pulled off something that is actually written for the buyer, but not for the seller. So there are certain things that are in a contract, there are certain terms that are included that could be based on case law that shift basically the liability from one party to another. So if you don't have the understanding of the law based on those, what's in the background, when you're reading it, you may not capture those points. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at these, because when an attorney who's practicing in this area and understand the law of that state, looking at one of these contracts, they're reviewing it. They're not reading it, because you are actually reviewing the terms of that contract. Whether if your client is the buyer, then you're looking at what are the liabilities that are shifted to the buyer versus the seller. What can be, what should stay neutral? Because when you are contracting as private parties, you can actually shift the liabilities based on what is, of course, allowed by the law. So if you're in a state like California, which is very consumer protective, there are certain laws that will apply. So if you are from another state and you pull the agreement, what may be okay in that state may not be actually valid or legal in California, for instance. So for giving you example, because I think a lot of times when we have examples, we remember things better. So let's say it's an employment contract and you have a non-compete provision in there. Well, what happens is in certain states, they allow those provisions. However, in like a state like California, there's high limitations on those and very hard to enforce those non-compete clauses. So those are another thing to think about. Other thing is, when if you ever get, the reason you have a contract is because you are really trying to avoid, if there's some type of a dispute come up, the contract should be able to give you a solution, how to address it. Now, if you got a contract off somewhere and the purpose of that contract differs from what really applies to your situation, then that what you have put together may not even prevent you from going into that litigation issues. Even if you're in litigation, if you have a good contract, there are certain things that you will benefit from because it's in the contract. So there's a reason why when you are doing these contracts based on, of course, the value of what you're doing, when you're doing it, what's matter to you during the weighing in what's really like a deal breakers, and also how much funding is involved or money is involved. You may want to work with the attorney who understand those risks and make sure that they are addressed in your contracts. Those are a few tips for people who are starting off, startups, and for those who have been actually doing the business but now might be ready to get their contracts up to date because they started off in a very low budget and may not have spent the money to get that in place. But it's worth putting that resources into something, building something, because like we say, if you build the foundation strong, it will withstand these other challenges. While if the foundation is weak or you're not sure how the foundation is, then it may not withstand the challenges that come true. So I hope that helps you in your business venture. And if you have any questions, my contact information is below. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And thank you for joining me. Bye.